The abominable betrayal of my wife. What a man does for his family should bring him praise and medals. Society should applaud every husband who stands up and fulfills his obligations. Isn't that worthy of attention? It was 4 years after my divorce, and I was sitting in my parents' living room watching soccer with the people I loved and hated the most. I didn't put it quite right. I loved some and hated others. There was no in-between. For my mom, Thanksgiving is a big deal. It's on par with Christmas. In her mind, we give thanks one day and celebrate with gifts a month later. For 4 years, she invited me to both holidays, and for 3 years, I declined. I told her, I'll come if Peggy and Fuqua aren't there. That's what I called her new husband, Bill. Bill was the one she had cheated with when she left me. Henry, I wish you wouldn't talk like that. I thought I raised you better than that. I'm sorry, Mom, but that's how I feel. If they're there, I won't be there. Henry, you have to understand. Peggy won't bring the kids if she can't come, and she won't come if Bill isn't welcome. Mom, I'm your son. She cheated on me, and he's the one she cheated with. I'm not going to play nice. If I have to be in the same room with him, I'll be arrested, and they're not worth it. I wish you'd change your mind. Sorry, Mom. Somehow, every year since the divorce has gone like this. This year was the first time I agreed. Oh, Henry, I'm so glad you decided to join us this year. You don't have to bring anything. Everything is already taken care of. Just come and enjoy yourself. Your dad is looking forward to seeing you, and the kids will be so surprised. I can imagine how surprised they'll be. Just tell Peggy to keep that asshole away from me. I won't be looking for him, but if he catches my eye, I can't promise what will happen. Mom looked worried. Peggy had never been good at doing what she was told. It seemed that everything that happened to her was a deliberate act of defiance. When we were first dating and married, we used to go on amazing hikes in the mountains in the western part of the state. I swear, if she got too close to a cliff and I yelled, "Watch out!" I think she would have taken 2 more steps to prove she could. And as she was falling down the mountain, she would yell, "You're not my master!" It used to bother me, but I confess that in recent years, the thought has given me a certain pleasure. Despite my mom's words, I wasn't going to come empty-handed, so I made my famous cream cheese, beef, and jalapeno ball and bought a big box of crackers to go with it. I love these flavors, but I've rarely been able to enjoy them before because Peggy is lactose intolerant. The fact that Bill is intolerant of spicy food was just an added bonus. My kids have always been like me and loved this combination, so whenever we made this dish, we would gather around the plate and giggle and make faces. For Dad, I made sure to make a Cobb salad with lots of tomatoes, blue cheese and bacon like we both love, and we could eat it as an appetizer before serving the meal. Dad and I are both big fans of bacon and blue cheese. If I was going to go, I intended to spend time with the people important to me and ignore the others. After getting everything I needed ready, I dressed in my most fashionable casual clothes and headed to my folks' house. There is nothing wrong with looking austere while pretending, "Oh, is this old?" The only rule is that a person can look like that but not say it. I knew Bill would wear a suit with his fancy gold watch and a few other bling, but I also knew he was about 20 pounds overweight now, while I had turned into a gym rat after my divorce. Plus, I knew that Peggy had put on a few pounds herself. Thinking about all that bling brought me back to the day Peggy left me. She was sitting in the living room in her best business suit, and her suitcase was by the door. The room looked surprisingly uncluttered when I realized that all the knickknacks she had bought throughout our marriage, including porcelain figurines, first editions she had never read, cups and saucers we weren't allowed to use, were gone along with the ugly, overly ornate display case. I had to listen to her lament if I spent $40 on a new fishing reel, but she'd spent $2,000 on a first edition of a book she'd never read, and God help me if I questioned the reasonableness of her purchase. "What's going on, Peggy?" "I'm sorry, Henry. There's no easy way to say it. I'm leaving you." It's funny what goes through a person's mind at a time like this. I wasn't heartbroken. In fact, I welcomed the decision. It was the kids that bothered me. Where are the kids? They've already moved to a new place. Don't worry, you'll be able to see them whenever you want. That turned out to be a lie when the court ruled that I got what today is called liberal visitation rights. What's his name? What do you mean, Henry? There's no use lying, Peggy. You wouldn't have left me unless you had something in mind already, and I'm about to find out. What's his name? She said it quietly, as if she was embarrassed. Bill Jensen. Your boss? You're having sex with your boss? What a cliché. He's a good man and can provide for the kids in a way you never could. It's better for them and for me, too. In time, you'll realize that. Maybe it will even be good for you. I'm not asking for money because Bill makes more money than you do, so you'll even have more money to spend. It's good for everyone, Henry. You'll see. They say that time heals all wounds, but that's not true. The wound remains, but you feel the pain less. I missed the girl I married, but not the wife who left me. I missed coming home every night and spending time with my children. I still went to their games and concerts, spent every weekend and some weekdays and half of the holidays with them, but it wasn't the same anymore. You can't cram your whole life into every weekend and half of the holidays, but I tried my best. Anyway, I learned to make the best of it, and 4 years after my divorce, I started to move on with my life. I adjusted to my new normal, treasured the time with my kids, worked hard between their visits, hit the gym to burn off anger and love frustration, and then, 30 months after the divorce was final, I met Bridget. She was 3 years younger than me, had a daughter, a dog, a mortgage, an ex-husband who cheated on her, and had a 1,000-watt smile that lit up a room. It was Bridget who convinced me that I spend too much time and energy avoiding unpleasant situations and then missing out on the people I love. As she said, I'm just empowering them, whereas I should be using my own power. I don't know how or where she learned these things, but she is a loving woman, patient and wise beyond her years, and I was hopelessly in love with her. I was so in love that I bought a ring and planned a wedding for the second week after Thanksgiving, but that's another story. I arrived at my parents' house, walked into the house and was greeted with screaming and running as my kids pounced on me, and my parents calmly walked in my direction. It was a moment I had missed for too many years. Almost everyone who mattered to me was in my arms, and I felt wonderful. In fact, I was so stunned that I almost dropped the food I had prepared, but my mom picked up the bag and headed back to the kitchen after kissing me on the cheek. The kids were full of energy and excitement at the age when most kids start to get frustrated with their parents, and as we walked toward the back of the house, Dad whispered, "They're here. Are you ready for this?" I only nodded with a resigned look and walked into the lion's den. "Henry, I'm so glad to see you finally made it to one of the family events." She smiled with all the fake warmth and insincerity of which a phony is capable, and I mentally noted that she was only a member of this family insofar as she squeezed out the 2 grandchildren my parents adored. I couldn't help myself. "It's good to see you, Peggy. Life seems to agree with you." She knew that meant, "You've gained weight," and suddenly she wasn't so happy. A point in my favor. At that moment, an asshole came up to me with his hand outstretched. "Henry, good to see you. How are all those wires and circuits doing?" He knew I was an electrical engineer with a master's degree, which he didn't think was very highly regarded compared to a corporate manager, and his greeting was dismissive enough to pass the relatives test, or so he thought. I turned to my father in time to catch a glimpse of irritation on his face before smiling at our inside joke. The asshole had forgotten that my father was a chemical engineer himself. I turned and walked towards the kitchen, exclaiming as I went, "Dad, I made the Cobb salad you like. Can I get you a drink? And you, Bill?" "Thanks. I'm fine." He didn't look like he was fine. "Dad, how are things going with medical technology? How close are you to mass-producing a new vaccine?" "Okay, I'm an asshole, but I like it." Dad's smile says, "Message received." I poured 2 bourbons as Dad joined me in the kitchen, the kids walking 2 steps ahead of him. Joy is 13 years old, and I suppose it's obvious she's been named in happier times. She's turning into an amazing young woman, wise beyond her years and surprisingly fearless. Greg is 11, and his main problem is that when boys are fearless, they tend to lack common sense. Here's an example of what I mean. A few months ago, we were hiking in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains above Santa Fe when Joy came across a rattlesnake. We'd been through this with them before, and she knew what to do. But she was so poised and composed that for a moment I didn't understand why she stopped on the trail. She stepped back, pointed at the snake, and we walked around it to avoid a collision. I was so proud of her. Then Greg picked up a rock and threw it at the snake. You know what I mean? Anyway, I handed Daddy his bourbon while the kids unpacked the cheese ball. "Oh, great! Jalapenos!" Joy doesn't shy away from a little bit of heat. "It's spicy and creamy at the same time." Greg was already unpacking the crackers. "Dad, did you add the spices?" "Don't I always add it?" "Oh my God. This is going to be delicious." I cast a glance in Peggy's direction, and she looked absolutely disgusted. I was on top of things. Pretty soon, the day turned into a regular ritual. Parades, soccer, bourbon, and too many snacks. A man has to keep his cool if he wants to go all the way from turkey and stuffing to dessert. Bill was trying to enthuse his father-in-law, and his father was giving him a nod, so I took the opportunity to go out to the back patio and find a comfortable chair where I could sit quietly and enjoy the fall air. I heard one half of the double door open. "Are you going to talk to me, or are you just going to ignore me all day?" It was Peggy, as I'd assumed it would be. "I'm not ignoring you. I just don't have anything to say." "Henry, when are you going to get over it already? It's been 4 years. I thought, in about 4 hours. But she didn't need to know. In fact, I'd rather she didn't know. "I'm done with you, Peggy. What you did to me was a mean, vile betrayal, but I've dealt with it and tempered my anger." "You handled it?" "Henry Stevens, if I didn't know better, I'd say you were talking to a therapist. Are you a modern man now, Henry?" If she could have named me a single real accomplishment in her life other than squeezing those marvelous children out of her, I might have responded to such a high-minded remark politely, but I couldn't think of any. Peggy sat down at the other end of the table and asked, "Seriously, Henry, how are you doing? The kids say you're doing well, but they won't share any details." For the first time during our conversation, I turned and looked in her direction. In the bright light of day and for the first time in my life, I saw that my ex-wife looked older than her years. She was wearing too much makeup and it didn't hide the sadness in her eyes. To my surprise, I felt pity for this woman who had so effectively destroyed me just 4 years ago. "I'm fine." She hesitated, then asked, "I hear there's a new woman in your life. I'm happy for you." She didn't look happy. I nodded, not trying to suppress a smile. Truth be told, I was happy, and although I had no desire to communicate with either her or Bill, I realized that they no longer had any power over me, and that felt good. She took a moment to tell me about the kids. Nothing that I didn't already know, since they kept me informed of everything that was going on in their lives. One of the things Peggy may not have known was that she quietly admitted that they didn't care much for their stepfather, but they never humiliated him in front of me, and I respected that. It was never anything more than a grimace or an upturned nose, but it was enough for me to get the point. I'll admit, for the first few years, he had a local private investigator keeping an occasional eye on him. You know the old saying, "once cheated on," but they never found anything, and by all accounts he tried to be a good husband and stepfather, so you can give him a plus for that. But not cheating on his wife is a very low bar. Joy came out behind me and stopped for a moment when she saw my mother and I talking like civilized adults. "Shut your mouth, young lady. Your mother and I are just talking." That brought a willing smile to my face. Grandpa said he was making a salad. Do you want one? Tell your grandpa that if he eats all the salad, I'll drink all his bourbon. With a giggle, she left and 2 minutes later brought me a salad and iced tea. Grandma says to take it easy on the bourbon unless you want to sleep on the couch tonight. She thought that was very funny. Tell your grandmother her couch is too short for me. Joy loved playing messenger. I'll never understand how you can eat that stuff. Peggy was never really happy unless she had a reason to be displeased. She was referring to blue cheese. I'm reminded of an older friend who passed away last year. He had an expression that always made me laugh, and I offered it to Peggy. Don't taste it until you try it, the old woman said, kissing the cow. Whew! And with that, Peggy left, and I was left to enjoy my salad without her. Peggy went back into the house, and a minute later my father came out of there. What did you say to Peggy? She looks like she's been sucking on a lemon. Dad smiled as he said this. I pretended to be thoughtful and said, I told her I was happy. I guess I disappointed her. Dad chuckled as the two of us devoured the Cobb salad. What's that you're drinking? Iced tea. Mom told me to slow down on the bourbon. That elicited another chuckle from me as my dad nudged his bourbon in my direction. Your mom thinks you're drinking because Peggy and Bill are here. I took a sip and handed it back to my father. Mom worries too much. I really think I'm sick of them. I've noticed that. Do we have anyone else who wants dessert? I just nodded and smiled. Do they know what they're getting into? Yes, and I think she's looking forward to it. Now we were both smiling. Dad and I never lacked for conversation, and we knew enough about each other's engineering fields to talk about our work. He had some very strict NDAs, but I knew how to read between the lines, and as long as my competitors didn't find out anything specific about my work, I was safe. In due course, we finished the Cobbs and went back into the house. Dad resumed his conversations with Peggy and Bill, and I went into the kitchen to help Mom. She had trained me years ago, and all I needed were brief instructions. Now she was taking care of the grandchildren, and I set about helping. Joy moved casseroles and plates to the table while Greg mashed potatoes, though he liked to call it kneading better, and both took turns spreading the cream cheese mixture on crackers. Each time one of them had a treat, he would come back with 3 more servings for us. Did I mention I was proud of these kids? Peggy didn't lift a finger, although she brought a pumpkin pie that didn't look so bad. I preferred Mom's apple pie, but that was always the case. Dinner was soon ready, and Mom called us all to the table. Joy was 2 steps ahead of me and reserved a chair between her and Mom, across the table from Peggy and Fuckwed. When I saw this, I thought dinner was getting better and better by the minute. In fact, the whole meal was very enjoyable. I even pretended to listen to Peggy and Bill, but tried to look past them to include Dad in the conversation, and the food was excellent as always, something Mom was justifiably famous for. The meal was coming to an end when Bill, rubbing his hands together, announced, "Mom, that was great, but now I want Peggy's pumpkin pie." I flinched at the fact that he called my mom, Mom, but remained silent. Judging by her less than enthusiastic reaction, I guess she didn't like it either. She turned to me and asked, "Henry, when are the other guests arriving?" I was just about to answer, "Any minute now, I think," when the doorbell rang. Joy and Greg jumped up shouting, "I'll get it!" and rushed to the door. We heard cheers and not-so-loud squeals as they all hugged each other. I pulled up just in time to get a welcome kiss from Bridget and a big hug from little Clara as I pulled her away from Joy and Greg. In the time that had passed since they had met, my 2 had accepted Clara as the little sister they never had, and the 3 of them had quickly become inseparable. As I said, I planned to settle the matter in a more formal way soon. We ushered them both into the dining room, and before I could introduce them to each other, Mom stood up with open arms and exclaimed, "Bridget, I was afraid you weren't coming." They hugged, And then Mom asked with exaggerated attention, "Clara, will I get a hug too?" Of course she hugged. The three of them were already as close as three children could be, and both Mom and Dad were aware of my plans. The only ones left out were Peggy and Bill, and they were watching intently. I immediately set about solving the problem. Peggy and Bill, that red-haired goddess is Bridget Meehan, and that little terror over there is Clara. Clara giggled at this introduction and reveled in her familiarity. "Bridget, this is my ex-wife Peggy and her new husband Bill." "Oh yes, I've heard a lot about you. I'm glad we've finally met." There was a lot implied in that simple statement, and Dad couldn't help but smile when he realized it. Greg had already brought a chair for Clara so she could sit with them when Mom said, "Henry, don't just stand there. Get Bridget a chair. Come here, child, and sit with me." And having said this, she pushed her chair to the corner of her end of the table, making room for Bridget to sit beside her. That didn't go unnoticed by my ex either. "Do we need to know about this?" Mom asked, looking at the bag Bridget was carrying. "Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I made pumpkin praline bars. I hope you like them." It might seem like a fluke that she'd managed to combine two of Dad's favorite foods, pumpkin and pecans, and cover them with brown sugar and frosting. But she'd been instructed beforehand and knew exactly what she was doing. Dad was generous and ate a piece of Peggy's pumpkin pie and 2 pumpkin praline bars from Bridget before loudly dropping his fork on his plate and declaring, "That's it! I can't eat any more." Despite this, the 3 children managed without him. With Bridget's arrival, the dynamics of the conversation changed as both Mom and Dad shifted their attention to Bridget and Clara. I first saw this happen with Joy, and soon learned that Daddy likes to nudge little girls to talk, and little girls like to talk about themselves. They were a natural pairing. Now both Clara and Joy were making conversation, and Bridget was quietly telling her mother about the latest events that seemed so curious to her. Poor Peggy and Bill seemed to be left out, and I was more than happy to just watch, listen, and smile as I watched my new girls being drawn deeper and deeper into the family. So the evening went on like that for a while until Peggy decided to clear the table and Greg got up to help her. No one asked him to, he just did it naturally. This boy was growing up fast. Soon we moved into the living room, and that's when I noticed that Bridget and Peggy were missing. I found them in Daddy's study talking quietly and prudently decided to leave them alone. I don't know what they were talking about, and I never asked, except to ask Bridget, "Is everything okay?" "Sure. Why wouldn't it be?" She smiled, but it didn't seem to be so much because she knew why I asked, but because she was enjoying the night. "Well, I saw that you were engrossed in your conversation with Peggy, and I just wondered if everything was okay." That question elicited a quiet giggle. "I'm fine. I'm not so sure about Peggy, though. I have a feeling she might have buyer's remorse." All I had to do was smile, shake my head, and say, "Not my problem." I think it was that evening that I finally felt healed. I had been on the right track before, but it was that night, meeting my ex and remaining unharmed, and then seeing my future so well set up with the family that had raised me, that I finally realized that the past was behind me, and all good things were ahead. 2 weeks later, I got down on one knee and asked Bridget to marry me, and she answered me with an enthusiastic "yes," and then pulled me to the ground and threw herself into me. 8 months after that, we were married, formalizing our blended family. I still had a lot to learn about marriage and family. I realized that Clara's father was a bad husband, but a good father, and I tried to support his role in her life. He, in turn, learned to trust me as well, and this made Clara's life richer and easier. I also learned that while Peggy was a bad wife to me and Bill was no better, they both took their roles as parents seriously. In time, I learned to support their efforts and forgave them for the past so that I could live in the present without the weight of bitterness and anger that poisoned me for too many years. Bridget has a lot of credit for that. The years that followed were full of surprises. Most were happy and some made us struggle, but we always fought together. A year after the wedding, Bridget came to me with tears in her eyes and anxiety on her face. "Henry, I'm so sorry. I don't understand how this happened." "What happened, my love? Whatever it is, we can fix it." "I'm afraid it can't be fixed anymore, darling. It is what it is. I seem to be pregnant." I suppose you've heard the phrase, pregnant pause? I had never understood it until that moment. For a brief moment, I disconnected from the world around me. My thoughts were busy calculating the age when the baby would graduate from high school. I was thinking about our investments and college tuition, wondering if we should start another college fund, putting off buying the new car we were planning, thinking about how we could cheapen our vacation without disappointing the kids, realizing the house would be too small for a one-bedroom. "Henry, are you okay? Say something!" The phrase tore me from my musings. I looked at my bride, wiped the tears from her eyes, and said, "I think it's wonderful. Clara is going to have a little brother or sister. She's going to be so jealous." I think it worked. After that, we just stood there crying and hugging and laughing and kissing until we pulled ourselves together to just sit on the couch and hug each other. We decided to keep the new development a secret for a while and not tell the kids until we had moved on, and that's how they found us when they came home for dinner. In case you're wondering, we had takeout that night. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.